Hey, everybody. Welcome into another edition of Locked on Astros. Today, we talk about the workload of JP France and Hunter Brown. And I've got a special guest, a former Major League pitcher is joining me from Athletically Declined Sports. Let's get started. Hey, Mark, hit that music right now.
Welcome to Locked on Astros, your daily Astros podcast. Here are your hosts, Eric the Man Heisman and Brett H-Town Wheelhouse Chansey.
Hey, everybody, and welcome into another edition of Locked on Astros. I'm H-Town Wheelhouse, one of your hosts of Locked on Astros. Eric is not here tonight, but that's okay. We've got a special guest host. I will introduce him in a second. Make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check us out on Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. You can find me at H-Town Wheelhouse on X, Instagram, and TikTok. You can find me at Stros411 on X, Instagram, and Facebook. Always positive, always Stros. I'll tell you one thing I'm positive about, having a first-time guest way from the depths of Athletically Declined Sports world. We've got Mr. Kyle Dowdy. Daddy. We'll ask him who he's a daddy of on the diamond here. Maybe we can talk about some strikeout victims of his you might know. But Kyle Dowdy, thank you for joining. Tell us where they can find you on social media. Oh, hold on. And I'll unmute you. Go. That is my fault. That's my technical glitch. Go ahead, Kyle. My bad.
I love it. Yeah. Let's see, on X and Instagram at Kyle_Dowdy116. Brett, thanks for having me. I'm excited to dig into these two guys today.
No, yeah, definitely. And we thank y'all for tuning in. Shalonda, thank you for coming in. And Owen, what's up? I see you're here. Susan came in with an early question. An answer to an early question. And we'll talk about McCullers and Garcia later on. And yes, Mr. Ben-Hur. I wonder if he's the guy they made the movie about, but he is ready for a new season. But, we've got some big names to talk about today. But before we do, want to tell you all that this show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is the number one sports book in America. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets in your first bet of $5 or more. If it wins, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get started today. So, Kyle, we're talking about two guys that really, one of them hit the scene prior to 2023, came in late 2022, had some key outings, helped the Astros win a World Series. I got to talk to Dusty Baker at FanFest in 23 and told him how when I first met Hunter Brown, he had the second conversation I had with him at Constellation Field, I congratulated him on making the Futures game, him and Yainer Diaz, by the way. And he said, that's great, and I appreciate the accolades, but what I really want to do is be on the mound at Minute Maid Park helping the Astros win a World Series. And you know what? He kind of made it happen. And so we've got Hunter Brown, we've got JP France, who really was one of the more consistent arms in the Astros rotation. And when you have names like Javier, when you have names like Valdez and Verlander coming back, that's huge accolades for a young JP France.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I think France went out there and really showed his value this last year. Super excited to see what they do this coming year because, let's be honest, the Astros are stacked. They are primed and ready for the playoffs.
Exactly. And I think we've all we've all had a little sigh of relief whenever they signed Josh Hader. That was, Jim Crane said, okay, you don't think I'll open up the pocketbook? Let me show you what I got right here. And he pulled that rabbit out of the hat. But let's get right into Hunter Brown. Hunter Brown has talked about in the offseason and recently with Brian McTaggart that he needs to work on his consistency. And he said last year fatigue had set in, and he said it set in and he didn't realize the effect it had, because what he said was it caused his arm to drop and his angles to change. And when he was throwing pitches, towards the end of the season, he said he was leaving them arm side and just basically teeing off because he threw 162 and 2/3 innings, 30 more than he's ever amassed. His first half, Kyle, 6-4, 3.62 ERA, 1.2 WHIP. In his first 15 starts, 4 of the 7 starts, he didn't allow a run, and an OPS of 672. Now let's go to the last 14 starts, 5-9, a 5.95 ERA with a 1.57 whip and a 920 OPS. That's what you want your hitters to have, not what your pitchers to give up. So, Kyle, you're a former big league pitcher. You've pitched with several ball clubs. Tell us about fatigue. Tell us about that when you're ramping up, when you're going from the minors and you know maybe short season. Hey, you get some major, you have that first major workload. How is that? Is it not just a physical strain, but a mental strain as well?
It's definitely a strain of both. You look at him; he's 25 years old. That is a huge workload to undertake at 25 years old, first year in the big leagues, like truly a full season in the big leagues of work. I think he handled it well. Again, you only learn these things through going through the process, and he's now recognized that, okay, yes, I hit a fatigue factor and it caused these changes. Okay, so maybe his heater was a little more flat, things didn't have the depth they normally have, whatever it turned out to be. Hitters were catching on, and the fact that he can see that now and adjust his offseason to go into the next season of, okay, I'm going to be stronger, I'm going to be better conditioned and more aware of this happening. Maybe worst case scenario, he hits a fatigue point, but he can correct it much easier and much quicker.
Right, exactly, because he's never expressed this, and I think I even said it with not really like putting all the onus on him, but because he mimics his delivery, his windup, and everything like Justin Verlander, because he idolized Justin Verlander. I think everybody said, "Oh, is this the next Justin Verlander?" And which really for a young ball player, that's not really fair. But I think we as fans, we're always looking for that next superstar, right? We're looking for that next big pitcher. But this year for Hunter Brown, what do you think is the most important thing he needs to focus on to be the most effective pitcher he can in August through October and November, hopefully?
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing an Astros starting rotation that, okay, you got the first three spots pretty shored up. After that, you're not really sure. There's a competition going into spring without a doubt. You've got a ton of good arms that a couple have been incumbents from last season, but you look at it and it's like, man, it's going to be a dogfight in spring training. I think Hunter, worst case scenario, can slot in as that kind of bridge guy, for lack of a better term, in the bullpen and be lights out at it. Like you've seen him throw 1 to 2 innings at a time out of the bullpen from time to time and be really, really good because obviously his stuff just plays. I mean, he's power stuff up in the zone, hard downer curveball, like the stuff plays. So it really comes down to, okay, what is the organization as a whole thinking of using him as? Because you do have a guy in JP France who really made big strides last year. So we'll see. Hunter as a whole is going to be just fine. He's a young guy making adjustments, and it sounds like he's got every inclination to make the right moves this offseason to be ready to handle a full workload again next season.
No, yeah, definitely. And he's already looking at not necessarily retooling, but he mentioned working on a new slider with Miller and Murphy, two excellent pitching coaches who, the pitching wizard, Brent Strom, heavily endorsed when he exited and then ended up in Arizona to our chagrin. Please come back, Strom, everybody says. But he said the new pitch has lower velo, and he is looking to add it to his arsenal. You and I talked before show. His cutter slider is usually like 91. His fastball sits at 96. But right-handed hitters posted at 893 OPS, lefties 728. And the biggest change he's saying is the velo. So if he's changing velo, does that change the game plan of teams going into the season? Because they know the Hunter Brown of old. It's a Hunter Brown. When you add a new pitch like this, do you work it in slowly, or do you just let it eat and just throw it as much as it can be if it's successful?
Again, this goes to the analytics side of baseball. Like all the front office analytics people are going to run the numbers and tell them, hey, look, these are your best pitches right now. If I had to guess, Hunter's been working on a sweeper variation. It fits his arsenal perfectly, being that he has kind of that hard cutter, a good ride heater, a hard downer curveball. You're adding another dimension to attack. A couple of the organizations I've been with are like, look, if we can move 20 inches in every direction, that's what we want to do, because you're just exploring options at that point, and you can go strike the ball with anything, ball to strike with anything. He's opening himself up to be really successful against right-handed hitters specifically, which he struggled a little bit towards the latter half of the season. You add a sweeper, that's a huge weapon against right-handed bats, huge swing and miss potential, and it's kind of the in pitch right now because people are understanding how detrimental it can be to hitters.
I love that. And talking about adding things to your arsenal, I want y'all to think about adding FanDuel into your arsenal if you would today, because FanDuel is our sponsor. And let me talk about it here. All right, folks, thank you for tuning in. The Super Bowl is on its way, and who would you want to celebrate it more than with someone like FanDuel, the number one sports book? If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. So FanDuel has so many things for you to bet on. I mean, why not end the season with a W or 2 or 3? Not only can you bet on who will win the Super Bowl number 58 in Vegas, but FanDuel has bets for you, like which players will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored. I mean, who knows? Maybe there's something on there about how many seconds will Taylor Swift grace the TV. We know Mr. Fantasy at AD Sports is really worked up about that. So new customers join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet or more wins. That's right. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to sign up today. That's FanDuel.com/locked on. FanDuel, where we get our sports. And make sure that y'all tune in to the Locked On Network's 24/7 streaming channel. It is the only 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. All sports, the biggest stories, the latest news. And when Jordan hits 3 or 4 home runs in a game, Locked On Astros will grace that special. So check it out today. It's the only full-scale 24/7 sports channel. But yeah, Kyle, let's just get into this because the Houston Astros have on their plate a lot of things coming up. I want to talk about JP France, but I do want to ask you one question that someone did ask and see what you think about this. Owen says, do you think that Josh Hader will be our best pitcher? We'll talk about that, then we'll move on to JP.
Yeah, I mean, you look at adding Hader to that bullpen, and you've got a 3-headed monster that nobody in the league wants to face. You think Abreu, Presley, and Hader to close out a game, and you can interchange them any way you want, whatever the lineup matches up to. Saying he's the best pitcher on the team is a loaded question of some sort, but is he one of the best back-end arms in the game? Absolutely not a doubt. So is he going to be incredibly valuable? Yes.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing. I'm super excited to see what he does and what is on the horizon for this team. And what I think this team really strives on is, I remember when Correa left, everyone's like, oh, Correa left. He's kind of the heartbeat of the team, and you can't replicate that energy. And well, they won a World Series without Correa, and Jeremy Pena stepped in. Look, and not to get off on this, but I really think Jeremy Pena is going to have a bounce back year. I think he's heard the doubts. I think he's heard all the noise, and he's been working his tail end off. And I think he's going to barrel up a lot more baseballs. But let's get into JP France. JP France was a bright spot for the Houston Astros. I mean, there were a lot of things to be happy about. I mean, outside of the home record and the home woes, which we won't talk about because we talked about that a lot last year. It was weird going to an Astros game and not seeing a win for 3 or 4 games in a row. But you had JP France on the mound, and JP France really did an excellent job last year. He too pitched more than he's ever pitched before. But what is it about JP France that you like going into the 2024 season? And do you see him being as a part of his 6-man rotation or in the bullpen, or can you see him going back and forth?
I mean, he definitely could be part of the rotation. He pitched well enough last year to prove he can earn that spot in the rotation. Whether it be a 4 or 5 spot, who knows? You got to see how spring training shakes out with that. He has more than earned the opportunity to fight for that spot. You can see him as a long guy if that's a need be. You hate to see a guy that put up 150 innings last year with a 3.8, and all of a sudden he's now the long guy. For most teams, that's the third, maybe the second starter. So again, a wealth of riches for the Astros and Astro fans as a whole. But I mean, JP is unbelievable. You look at his numbers, really good just stuff overall. He kind of had a bit of the luck last year. If you look at just FIP value versus ERA, the FIP was almost a full run higher than the ERA. But again, he got himself out of jams when he needed to, and he has just plus spinning everything. His fastball and curveball mirror perfectly. He's got a good sweeper to go with it. He's got feel for the zone, and he competes the whole time through.
No, yeah, definitely. And you and I kind of talked about this a little before. JP Francis said he's working on a new pitch, Kyle. Now, he didn't tell us what the pitch was, but he said he says before debuting it in spring training next month. I almost said spring break. It's spring training next month. But he dismissed that any notion that last season's workload carried over into his winter, basically saying that navigating a shorter winter with some slight mechanical tweaks were on the horizon, but that's something that he would be working on. He said, I feel like I manage it pretty good, and I'm on a pretty good timeline right now going into spring training. He never appeared in a spring training game last season. He was with the minor league camp. He was with the minor leaguers in Florida. And when he came on, wow, the piggybacking system, I think, is one that the Astros utilize very masterfully in the minor leagues. I don't know enough about the other teams' minor league systems and how much they use that, but it seems like the Astros really have found a niche for their pitchers and how to prepare them, because you saw Hunter Brown come in sometimes in the fifth inning on and be effective. He did that. I remember whenever you had, I think it was Jake Odorizzi or someone came in from a rehab start. He pitched 4 innings. Hunter Brown came in and pitched the final 5, and it was like a start. But JP France, what kind of pitch? Do we want to guess what kind of pitch he might be adding? Or, I mean, it's not like we have any inside intel on his pitch, but what do you think? You're a baseball guy. You're a former pitcher. What is he most likely to maybe go to if he's adding something that would fit his arsenal?
So if we look at his arsenal as a whole right now,
right,
we're looking at a guy who spins his fastball incredibly well, gets good carry from a low vertical approach angle. He spins his curveball very well and mirrors the heater great. So you're probably not changing anything there. Throws a quality sweeper, and he's got a plus changeup. So really the only quadrant, if we're looking at it on a graph, that we're not truly exploring is some sort of running fastball, like a 2-seam or a sinker. If I had to guess, he may be messing with some sort of seam-shifted 2-seam, because that seems to fit the feel he has for the baseball. Obviously, he knows how to spin the ball in every direction thus far, and that's the only spot he hasn't. Again, that's a huge weapon to throw against righties, because then you sync up, you're going 2-seam in, sweeper off of it, and you're drawing X's on corners of the plate, and that's a huge weapon.
So because he has 5 pitches right now, correct?
Yeah.
If he had a 6th pitch, you said, wow, he's going to turn into Yu Darvish. But if you're a 5-pitch pitcher, what is most likely the scenario? That someone adds a 6th pitch, or they take one of their pitches that's the least effective out?
That's totally dependent on his arsenal, what the analytics say about certain pitches.
So it's really case-by-case basis.
Very much case by case. Again, teams are okay if a guy has 5 pitches that he throws in the zone consistently, adding a 6th pitch, because you're just adding a weapon at that point, where it's like, okay, you're going to subtract from the usage of everything else, but in the end, it produces a better product. So I think possibly adding a 2-seam or some sort of seam-shifted wake makes a lot of sense for him. Well, we'll see what he cooked up, but if I had to guess, that's kind of the direction he's going.
Okay.
Because again, the changeup has depth. You don't need to really think about adding a split. He's not a Neris type guy where a split's going to be a huge difference maker.
Right.
Yeah. It just looking at it from a plot standpoint, that makes the most sense. And again, it's another weapon. And he didn't struggle command-wise. Like his walks weren't through the roof or anything. He's pretty polished. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he's adding a 6th pitch.
Awesome. Look, I'm excited about JP France. I'm excited about Hunter Brown. I'm excited the work that I'm seeing guys like Christian Javier put in the offseason, Brian Abreu put in the offseason. These guys from the DR, man, they go down on the beach. They work in the sand. They don't go to some like really nice gym that costs thousands of dollars, because I've heard, I was like, oh, look at all these cool professional athletes in the offseason wearing these gyms. I didn't know y'all actually had to pay these people. I thought you just went and worked out for free because you're pros, right? Hey, come work out at our gym. Oh, no, it cost a pretty penny. And if you're not on a major league salary, you're taking a cut into the bread money, aren't you?
Yeah, and luckily there are some really, really good training places. The place I trained, Dynamic Sports in Houston, was unbelievable at working with minor leaguers on that. Obviously, once you get that big league paycheck, you do spend a little bit more. But yeah, I know there's a few places that you really, really pay for it. But again, it's an investment. And what
True.
you do, you're investing in your body and in your work. It never really returns void in that.
Oh no, yeah, that's true. And we're gonna talk about the new backstops here next. But before we do, I wanna talk to everybody about eBay Motors. So let me tell you about eBay Motors right now. eBay Motors is here. If you have a passion to drive what brings home a winning trophy, well, we know in Houston what it brings. It brings home a championship. Will your ride or die? Keep it alive today with eBay Motors. They have everything you need to maintain your vehicle. Everything from roof racks, superchargers, exhaust kits, LED lights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 parts and your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time and your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your ride or die alive with the ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, Kyle, let's get into it, man. So now we've talked about Hunter Brown. We've talked about JP France. Now let's talk about the backstops. We've got Yainer Diaz, who was pretty much a student to the Professor Maldonado last year. We've got Victor Carantini, who did he catch in Milwaukee? None other than Josh Hader. I wonder if that's how that was supposed to work out. I just, it's so funny to me. Like, we think the Astros are so short-sighted, and so many people were doubting Crane before we signed Hader, but I don't think Carantini and Hader ending up in the same place again was an accident. I think maybe Carantini being here might have helped seal the deal a little bit for Hader outside of that nice payday he got. But tell me, you're a pitcher. You've worked with many catchers, and I'm sure you could have something positive to say about every single one of them. But there's certain guys that you probably work with a lot more effectively, and it's about chemistry, right? It's like a center and a quarterback. It's like, just different sports have these different things, right? A point guard and a five on a basketball court. So Yainer Diaz coming in, high hopes, high expectations. How do you think this guy comes in handling? He's got a veteran staff. He's got a first ballot Hall of Famer that he's calling pitches for. Tell me about Yainer Diaz, your impression of him so far.
Looking at last year, you have to be incredibly impressed with just how he came up, how he handled himself, not only behind the plate, but with the bat as well. It's exciting to have a young catcher that seems to have such a good feel for the game, where there's not really a doubt of him handling a pitching staff. But then you go out and get Caratini to bring in behind him and keep that mentorship kind of going. I see nothing but good things with Diaz behind the plate personally. And again, this is continued learning for him. Like, he sat underneath Maldonado last year, learned a lot. I would bet there's a bit of discipleship that happened between those two. It's just like, hey, this is how we handle the pitching staff here. This is what's expected. When you see this is what guys are thinking. And so now you have Caratini, who, again, the only guy Diaz doesn't know, and the pitching staff is Hader, and you have the perfect guy to give him the playbook now.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And if it ever is something where you're going to put Carantini in there whenever Hader comes up, if you're sure you're going to lock it down there in that ninth, which, and then Carantini, if it goes in extra innings, can play, give him that playing time. The thing I like is there's not a ton of pressure to force Carantini into the catching role, because he can also play first. He can also DH. So he is a multifaceted catcher at that position. And you mentioned kind of a professor and student, and it's funny because I've actually mentioned that on the show. I've talked to people close with Yainer, And they've said Yiner pretty much was like a sponge, and he was just taking in the information. And I promise you, if you were to ask him, did you want to play more last year? I mean, what major league player isn't going to say, oh, no, I don't want to play? Like, it's not much. No, he wanted to play, but I think he understood it. And to the chagrin of a lot of Astros fans, and we chronicled it here a lot, we were like, okay, look, if you're going to give rest days, Maldi's the guy to give the rest day to because he's the longest in the tooth in that catching position. I mean, I remember Carlton Fisk when he was late in his career catching. I couldn't believe he was catching as long as he did. That was pretty stellar because being a catcher as a kid growing up, that was my favorite position, Kyle. I loved catching because when I played, you got ran into. You got ran over, and if you were blocking the plate, they would plow you over. And you know what? If you held onto the ball and they didn't attempt to slide, they got thrown out, and they were out at the plate. So kind of a double whammy there. But so you have Yiner. What are some things that he's going to have to do this offseason that or in spring training that he didn't do last year as the backup?
I think his whole spring training is just getting to know the pitching staff. Like, he knows how to call a game. He knows the flow of a game, what he's trying to do, how he's trying to set hitters up. Like, that part doesn't change. The adjustments from pitch to pitch with his pitchers is what he's learning this spring, where luckily it's a lot of the same faces. So there's not a huge learning curve for him. And he got to sit with Maldi last year, where if Maldi's catching a game, I guarantee Maldi comes off the field. He's on the bench. Yiner's going over there. Okay, I saw you do this. Why did we go this direction? And then he can take that information, run it through the analytics that he's given. That, okay, that makes total sense. Like, now I know when I see this or this happens, I'm calling this pitch next.
Yeah, exactly. And it was funny, and I think some people have kind of taken this and ran with it, but it just seems funny because Dusty Baker had the famous line, "Houston, you're going to thank me later." And I asked you before, as a pitcher, was this probably from a baseball standpoint the best course of action for Yainer Diaz? And what was your opinion on that? Because I want the people to hear a major league pitcher's opinion, not just some, because it's funny when I have opinions that people like, they love it. But then when I don't, they're like, you're just a fan. So you're not just a fan. You got credibility, sir.
A little bit, a small amount. But yeah, I think
that a lot more than a little bit, but go ahead.
I think that was played perfectly by Dusty Baker. He did exactly what was in the best interest of not only Yainer Diaz, but the organization as a whole.
Okay.
Because you're giving this young catcher a chance to get acclimated to the big leagues, learn under someone who's now done it and caught through World Series multiple times, run through heavy lineups of all-star teams, basically, when you look at the Braves, the Dodgers, like different teams that he's had to call games against with top-tier pitching. So Maldi spent time with a Verlander, guys like that, who he surely has learned from, of like, okay, that's how JV's thinking through this at bat. That's how he's trying to attack these guys. How can we use that with a guy like Hunter Brown, JP France? How do all of these arsenals come together? They're not the same, but there's similarities, and we can use those similarities in similar attack plans. But again, then your creative juices get going as a catcher back there. And you're like, okay, if this is successful doing this, how else can we pitch off that? Whether it be pitch tunneling, effective velocity, go and strike the ball to strike. Like, just depends how you want to set people up. And I think Yainer Diaz got a great tutelage of that last year. I'm excited to see how he moves into the more starting catcher role this year. But again, I think it was for his best that he wasn't the number one guy back there. I think having Maldi there was definitely for Yiner's best last year.
Yeah, and I can respect that. I mean, that to me is hard to argue. But this has been a great show. I mean, your knowledge and understanding of the game from your pitching mind. I mean, let's just name them off. You played for, I'm going to call them the Guardians now, but they were formerly the Indians. But you have pitched for the Guardians, the Reds, the Mets, and the Rangers and the Orioles, correct?
Yeah, I mean, let's see, drafted by the Tigers, traded to the Indians, Rule 5 to the Mets, DFA to the Rangers, DFA back to Cleveland, free agent deals with Cincinnati and Baltimore. I've been all over the place. I've seen everybody's analytics, how they handle pitching staffs, all those different things.
That's amazing.
And just from getting to know Houston minor league players right now,
Right.
man, they definitely understand how to teach pitching, how to teach sequencing, how to get the best out of their guys. So yeah, as an Astros fan, you got to be excited to see who's coming down the pipe.
Yeah, exactly. No, I do. I mean, there's position guys. There's Colton Gordon, Spencer Arrighetti on the mound. You've got Joey Loperfido, who I'm super excited to see. I really wish Pedro Leon would fix the holes in his swing, because that kid's a 5-tool player in the making. But there's so much more we could talk about and dive into, but because we can't get to that right now, we're definitely gonna have to have you back. We're gonna have to have you back when we got Eric with us, and we can all three have a real good baseball conversation. But Kyle, tell everybody where they can find you real quick before we go.
Yeah, on X and Instagram at Kyle_Dowdy 116. Again, I'm part of Athletically Declined now, throwing out some baseball content. If you get interested, have a little here and see what we got going.
No, yeah, definitely. I believe you have a show called Call to the Pen. Is that correct?
Calling the Pen and Pen Pals.
Calling the Pen and Pen Pals. That's right. So check that out on Athletically Declined. Go subscribe to the YouTube channel. Thank you for stopping by. And make sure you subscribe to Locked On Astros. Remember, we're your team every day. As we are getting ramped up, so are the guys getting ready to head to Florida. It's going to be an exciting season. I foresee another title in the Astros' future. Will it be 2024? I guess we'll have to find out. Well, for myself, for Eric, everybody here at Locked On Astros, I'm H.N. Willhouse. He is Kyle Dowdy, former Major League pitcher. And by the way, his last season, AAA was 8-4. He's no slouch. The dude can throw gas, and he can bring the heat on the mic. Thank you so much. And remember, we're your team every day. Astros. Oops, that's the wrong one. Eric, I need you back. That's a wrap. Good job. Great show.